Uh, when we were designing this particular panel, we were thinking who were the best guys for us to have on the panel. I think I reached out to each one of them. And interestingly, the questions are so painful that I heard that Arif was spending time in the night to come back. So some of the insights you will get is very, very deep. And same, I think everybody has actually done a lot of work to it because merchant acquiring in a segment is transforming dramatically. A lot of changes have happened, right? So I think it's good to understand how it is going to work. We know that MDR is becoming less and less relevant in this segment as UPI leads the whole framework. And of course, new ways of revenue pools are coming up with maybe UPI on credit card or UPI on credit. And of course, a lot of lending which is already happening on the throughput, right? So I think that's a point. I think I've already spoken quite a point on merchant acquiring, so I'll not take anything off. Whatever I have, I think a lot of learning I've taken from talking to each one of them and asking questions. So maybe I'll start from a banking perspective first. So I think in terms of Indraneel, from a bank's perspective, how is merchant acquiring evolving right now? UPI is obviously becoming larger and larger. And how do banks think about merchants right now? Because merchants were always looked at differently. But what is it happening now? What is going to happen in future?
Hello. Yeah, thanks, Samir. Thanks for having us here. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I think, and I think that's really the theme of this discussion, right? We have now moved from merchants merchants are essentially anchors for bigger business from a banking perspective because banks have multiple products, right? And I think there's no harm in saying that there's little to no money to be made on the transaction per se when you look at UPI sound boxes or most of the other channels. So why do actually banks do this, or what is the game here? So these are actually funnels for banks to get customers on board or merchants on board. Develop a relationship because payment is something that everybody needs, right? And it's a commodity. Of course, there are reliability parameters and there are better ways of doing it, and we'll talk about that during the session. But really, the idea is to get access to the customer. When I say customer, I mean the merchant and customer I use interchangeably. And we'll talk about the various kinds of customers that we segment these into. But look at them from their credit needs, from their remittance needs. That's an increasing piece which is happening now. Wasn't so prominent earlier. Their float management, pretty much their entire business stack per se.
Okay, thank you. So, Arif, what are the key shifts from an acquiring perspective you're seeing in the market? And how merchants are coming back and thinking about working with acquiring platforms. So what shift has happened? Because UPI anyway is there, right? It will continue to scale, and I'm sure MDR will keep shrinking as we go, despite what we say. So what's going to happen in future, and what's the shift you see in the market?
Thanks for that, Samir. So this is a question we reflect very often back in our organization, right? So I actually try to pull out how have I answered these questions in different forums within the organization. So I'm going to use some of my notes, okay? I think one of the fundamental shift that we are seeing is the identity shift, right? I think, and I see the new generation organization already leaning and talking about it. See, earlier it was, you see as a merchant as a payment accepting unit, right? And I think UPI has made it omnipresent. So I think that question is out. I think from identity, what I mean is, even if it's a small shop, you need to look at someone who's generating cash flows, who's got a digital trail. He's looking that now that you're present in my store, what can you do for me over there? He's looking that, hey, what can you do and give me insights based on the data signal? So I think there's a massive understanding that one needs to put behind that. Look, these are not just counters where there is payment accepting, there's a whole lot of other activities happening, right? So he's running his ops, he has to manage his inventory, however small a merchant, he has to make his vendor payments, and I think that's where the larger one is. And I think there was a bit of indexing on the monetization option. I think it all leans into that, right? As to how do you look at it. So I think we need to shift away from this paradigm that, hey, a merchant is only for payment acceptance and start looking at it. It's a commerce in itself. It's an industry in itself. He is a business in itself. I think we need to start recognizing that, and the earlier we do, the better it is, right? And in this, what has happened, the acquirer's job has changed, right? The acquirer's job is no more to go and distribute sound boxes and POS machine. I think that's a given. I think the acquirer's job is to, hey, pick up the signals, provide them insights. For example, if there is a merchant and he knows that he has to do he has to go and do some kind of market transaction in Faridabad, for example, at 2 o'clock, then he's not looking for a settlement on T0, T plus. We should talk about, right, settlement on T1, T2, T0. It's not relevant to him. What's relevant to him that, look, when I'm in the market, I need the funds based on my cash flow available to me or an overdraft available to me. I think that's the paradigm shift, that the way I look at it. So I think it's a lot of, we need to see this from a different identity. I think earlier it was very transactional, it has to go deeper. The other is where we, from an acquisition, we need to go to something what I would call to a belonging, right? As to how do I belong to this merchant? Again, the realistic thing would be that, we talk a lot about MDR. I think the merchant is saying that, look, if it's a small store, let's understand this, right? Like India, where there are a lot of digital transactions happening, it's not happening because the QR has been placed there. It's happening because the customers are forcing him to do that, right? So it's not that we've helped him grow his business. By doing this, the merchant in himself is not seeing monetization, right? And if he's not seeing monetization by that, then how will it make monetization for us, right? I mean, that's the beauty of a digital public infrastructure in a certain way. I think what's happened over there is, now the merchant is again asking this question that, hey, how do you make it contextual to me? Can I give an offer? Can I do a repeat transaction, right? Hey, my traffic goes down on a Tuesday, what can I do more over there? I think so these are the two paradigm shifts that we are seeing, and I think increasingly banks, fintechs like ourselves have to work together as to how do we embed ourselves over this front. That's the way I look at it.
No, thank you. Arif, I think record karke so convert karenge story mein, right? I think the depth is missing, right? I have not seen much report on merchant acquiring as well in the market, right? So I think you need to write a book, I guess.
Yeah, I think we've got too sucked into either the distribution side or the MDR side or the transaction processing side. I think we've forgotten the human side of it perhaps, and I think that's where we need to get back to, right?
No, I agree. And as it as an MSME, I realized that nobody, as a banker, I didn't have empathy for myself, right? So once you become MSME, you realize it's different. And today accounting is done by you. I'm sure many of you would have found that my invoicing to you would have gone late, right? There's a human behind. System could have done it, would have been easier. We just end up doing it all ourselves, right? So there's a lot of changes to be done. But let's move to Anand to you. Maybe you can quickly introduce PaySprint as well, right? Because Razorpay we know Federal Bank, but I think you come from a different segment. You are doing really well. So I think from entity you are doing really well. So it may be good to quickly 1 minute introduce the company, because I've seen you doing really well for a long time.
Thanks, Amit. Well, I think PaySprint, we are about a 5-year-old company now. We largely into payments. When I say payments, which is both into business banking and escrow banking. And apart from that, we also do good work on verification and on compliance part. So these are the areas that we really work with. Focus areas obviously is MSME customers, and today we empower close to about 4,000 odd MSMEs across in India. So that's what we do.
Perfect. So Anand, maybe from an infra layer perspective, because we are taking different perspective from each one of you, from your infra perspective for payments, what do you see the market is changing? What is happening on acquisition side?
Well, yes, at least on the merchant acquisition part, what we're seeing is today, payment has become kind of an invisible infrastructure now, right? So today the merchant is not really bothered about saying, can I have a QR, can I have a QR live? What is saying, what is beyond payment? The question is asking today is, what is that you're going to mean beyond payment? So we see a shift now in terms of what the merchant is asking. Secondly, I think what's getting very prevalent today is the payment orchestration and a kind of a multi-rail intelligent system available, right? So, especially, what is more concerned about the merchant today is, can I have 100% uptimes? Can I have an intelligent routing system in place? And I think that's something that today the merchant is asking. I think the basic, is already gone by. I think we're getting into the next stage of it. Thirdly, what we look at is the kind of an embedded acquiring, which largely means we're looking at platforms, we're looking at SaaS, we're looking at marketplaces, and no longer it's a vanilla kind of product getting sold. It's getting sold more as an embedded kind of a platform. And the fourth important, I believe, is the data. Obviously, data becoming, much more critical today, right? I think, obviously, the transaction data are getting used today to do a lot of host of other things, right, from lending and a lot of other activities. So data is getting into a much critical zone as we speak. So I think right now merchant acquiring has become more like a financial operating layer. It's no longer just merchant acquiring, it's actually a financial operating layer is what we see right now.
No, I think we will have a session on the operating structures tomorrow when Ramesh is going to talk about it maybe at a broader level. Ramesh is from HDFC Bank, so it will be good for you guys to listen to him tomorrow on the tech side, how he's doing it. Maybe, I think, Indraneel, we are talking about segmentation. There are too many segments out there. You have a segment for QR only, then you have Soundbox, then you have segment which does POS, then you have enterprise, and some of them use across all products, right? So, which segment do you think is most critical for banks, and how is the monetization possibilities? What is happening in those segments? Anything from your side?
Good question. I think this is what I was alluding to earlier, because there are so many different kinds of segments that you have to look at them in certain buckets. The way we look at them is broadly 3 buckets. One is a plain transactional kind of segment, right, where you basically just do a Soundbox or a QR or whatever. That's not where you actually focus. Those are not really the critical ones. Of course, there it's payment as an enabler. We are acting as enablers of payments, or we are Razorpay, or we together essentially. The second segment I would say is extremely critical, which is the small businesses, where we are enabling their entire business. We are not just enabling payments, we are enabling business, and I'll explain, I'll kind of double click on that. So essentially when we are giving a POS or a Soundbox, we are also entering their ecosystem, and that gives us an ability to understand their cash flows, collections basically. From there, we can take a call on the credit. We can take a call on their, like Arif said, on their vendor payments, because however small a merchant is, they will have vendor payments. If there is, there's a whole lot. For us, and then obviously there is the whole float story and pretty much all the products that we can cross-sell. There are business cards, and for the individual sole prop, if there's a proprietor behind it, then we have a whole suite of retail banking products. So it's actually an entry point into that business, and that, to answer your question, Samir, is probably the most critical. But equally critical and growing fast is also the enterprise business. Right? That's the third segment, where you are actually having a slightly more or significantly more sophisticated class of merchants, where you also have to enable integration into things like their ERP or their point of sale terminals, which are more sophisticated than just a plain Soundbox. And that, in addition to what I already said for the earlier segment, also has increasing product requirements, because these are not exactly small. Some of them are very large, because obviously if you have a chain also, if you have a conglomerate and if they have a retail chain, there also they will now accept QRs, right? So that also serves as an entry point to the enterprise. Even if it's an SME or somewhere between an SME and a conglomerate, typically these people will have imports, they will have some amount of exports. That again becomes, as I said earlier, a hook onto the foreign currency flows. So essentially, this simple Soundbox or a QR opens up this whole visibility into cash flows. It opens visibility into their entire business, and that's where a smart bank can actually expand and cross-sell their products.
Oh, perfect. So, Arif, from your perspective, again, your vantage point comes from across your experience. You have been on network side, you have been on the bank side, and of course, you have been on the PAPG side as well. From a needs perspective, how do the needs of various segments differ? And how the monetization potential can be sort of picked up from each segment, because everybody wants to make money, nobody wants to bleed. So both sides, right? What are the needs and how do you do it profitably?
So, actually, I don't know, with these experiences I've got old, I'm not sure whether I've got wise. So, I'm not sure that if I'm right, but while technically it would be right, in the sense that you have these small, medium, and then enterprise category of merchants, etc., right? And I think because I was part of UPI and the thinking that was going behind the protocol, I think what it's done is, in a certain way, is it's got, if you define it in 3 economies, they're all running on the same rail. So we need to look at it slightly differently. I'm not saying it's wrong to technically look at it. So for example, one of the things is, if you look at, what we are calling the small merchant, the Kirana merchants, right? It's an economy of trust, right? And like for him, it's all about hey, the payments is going to come, payments is going to be in time, and etc. Whatever you do around, right? And then if you go to the next degree, which is, so let's say the first one, typically we define it as QR merchant, POS merchants, and enterprise API merchants, right? That's how you typically classify it technically. So the QR merchant is largely an economy of trust. The POS merchants is, let me say, the economy of complexity, right? Because they want value-added services. For example, I have never met a merchant who wants a payroll system. What he wants is, I want to pay my employees by the 5th or the 1st week. That's what he wants, right? He doesn't want that, hey, I want to file my taxes. He wants to make sure that his invoices are GST ready, right? So the complexity, the value-added service, and that's where the monetization also, right? So if you understand it from where the economic thought process is coming, that's where the value will also come in. And the third is largely where it's more about giving them economy of optionality. What I mean is the large enterprises, right? For them, they look at you as an infrastructure embedded over there. So always available 24/7, never going down. I mean, I keep telling the team, right? If you want to make money in enterprise, then it means you have to make sure that the CEO, the founder, and the CTO get a good sleep. If they're not getting a good sleep, you'll not get paid, right? And then you apply the monetization layer on each of them, right? Now, incidentally, the largest chunk comes from the smallest, this thing, right? The largest volumes come from there, but it's got the least margins, right? I mean, because practically UPI is free. How do you make money over there? I think the opportunity over there, over the money is, hey, can I get him a little more credit at the right time, be embedded in his workflow for his cash management, and make sure that he gets overdraft as and when required, settlement required, and those kind of things, right? The second category, which is the most complex, I think there's an opportunity to do things like payroll, GST-based invoices, light ERP, light, light financing tools, reconciliation, etc. They'll reward you for that, right? And the third one, right, if I've understood it right, is, hey, because you're an infrastructure internally for him, give him the optionality. If one system goes down, the second is available, the third is available, and so on and so forth, right? So I think they will pay for the fact that they can sleep at the night, right? So that's the way I would like to see that. And we need to understand that each of them have what I call a data signal, right? I mean, for me, what is AI, right? Anything that you can take as a data signal and convert into a product is something which I can use AI for. That's what AI does for me, right? And I think that's where. And in the second bucket, you'll find a lot of AI. I mean, we've been talking about it, right? That AI is eating SaaS companies. I think in the second bucket, it becomes very relevant, right? In the third bucket, like this signaling as to how is the system performance, where do I route, at what pricing, it becomes relevant. I think so we need to step back, look at it slightly differently, see what are the data generation points, and then say that, hey, where will I make? See, I think we need to forget about this, that, payment is not meant to make revenue. We need to understand that. It's a Trojan to do a whole lot of other services. And then we need to understand that, see, I think this is my original thinking, right? So earlier, what were we doing, right? As payment companies, we were providing something called checkout, right? Now, UPI was either seen as a payment method or a payment instrument, depending on which side, whether you're Bombay crowd or Bangalore crowd, depending on that, right? But for me, UPI is replaced checkout, right? Because it's got all the instruments behind it. it's got OD, it's got your liability account, it's got your current account, it's got credit, it's got your credit card linked to it, right? So by itself, it's actually a complete checkout. And everything that we want in the country is now running on that. So I think it's time that we shift and look back, right? So, hey, now how do we do it? For example, the reason I know it's early days, but you look at, while UPI on credit card, I think is doing what, 40% of the RuPay transaction, or 40 or 50, don't hold me to the numbers, I'm not an economics guy. But you look at when UPI and credit comes in, I know it has its own hurdles, commercial, etc. But from the small bits of data available that I've seen, the NPA is sub 2%, which is not a bad signal. The cost of acquisition is roughly down by 75%.
That is important.
Right? And imagine this, right? You do a payment transaction, average person does a payment transaction 8 to 10. I smoke, so I do 15 times a day. Right? Most of us would be doing at least a dozen times. At every point, there's a credit opportunity. So it's part of your behavior. UPI is a part of your behavior. Now credit becomes a part of your behavior. The cost of acquisition, and you've been on the issuing side a lot, the cost of acquisition is so high, it's not contextual, right? I'm sitting at my home, hey, aapko credit card chahiye. I'm watching TV with my kids. I want India to win. I'm not worried about a credit card, right? But here, at the point of interaction, right, if you give that credit facility, it's so different. An average transaction in UPI is like $1,300, right? And then you go to enterprise, and the average transaction is roughly around 8,000, 9,000 rupees. That's where the credit opportunity is. So I think we need to look at it. I know there are some breakers in between, but I do see this really becoming big, right? And I think that's where the monetization. And when credit comes in, we need to think about how will the P&L look like, what is the kind of reconciliation I would want to do, and so on and so forth. Speaking to one merchant, if I can take 10 seconds more, especially in what I call the economy of complexity, they yet receive a lot of cash payments. Mm-hmm. They are not able to see a dashboard that tells them that how much is cash coming, how much is digital coming, right? And for him, he doesn't care from where the money is coming. As long as it's banked, as long as it's available to him. And he's saying there's no one who's seeing that and giving a forecast. I'll give you another example, right? If that's your entity, right? If you go out to the market and go to, let's say, Indraneel's bank and say, hey, looking for a loan, what would they look at besides doing your KYC, UBO, etc., and all those kind of things, the regular AML checks? They would possibly look at the money you've raised, or they would look at your cash flows. How much hopefully you're making money out of this event, right? Would they consider the footfalls? Would they consider who are the people who came and spoke over here? Who are your sponsors, right? Now, those are, for me, are data signals, right? And I think that's where it will all get to, right? If we can convert all that, and I think that's where the bank partnership also plays a role, right? I think if we can convert that, making it meaningful, I think it's easier for someone who's underwriting also to execute it much better, much more efficiently. We kept saying that, payments is data exhaust, but what we are not realizing is with that data exhaust, there are so much more you can gather, right? And that's, I think, the point. So QR is nothing but a sensory point. So that sensor can pick up and do something, right? So that's the way I would.
Fair point. Fair point. I think it's I repeat, you should write a book on this, right? Okay. And I'll be honest, I see so many books on transformation written by people who don't know. Okay. So it'll be very good if you can write, because that's where the whole knowledge is, right? Entrepreneurship, I think I would love to see from those who do it, right? So it's just experiential. नहीं तो motivational speaker आके कुछ तो लिख के चले जाते, right? So I think we're done with that era. So Anand, from your perspective, so there are a lot of layers out there, enablement, onboarding, and all of that. So at each layer, what are the capabilities which are very, very crucial for somebody to sort of enable or build? Because banks are also looking at these capabilities at scale, and everybody needs it, right? It can be a fraud layer, management layer, it can be a layer on AML, it can be a layer on onboarding, servicing. What are the layers and what are the capabilities which I think you think are very good right now, and where the work still can be done?
Well, I think, rightly said, I think today, the entire, if you look at it in the merchant acquiring space, the kind of layers that you have today, it's just not just about a plain vanilla product. It's much more than that, right? For example, if you look at, let's say, for example, a POS, if you examine a QR, I think what's more needed is just not the QR, it's also about how fast and how reliable. If you look at POS, the question is not just offering POS machines anymore. It's how intelligent, how are you managing remotely, or how are you able to also ensure that there is a, an operational layer at the top of it, how we have done a cross rail on the top of it, because customer today or the merchant today is saying saying 100% of times, can I have it? What is the other analytics that you're able to offer on the top of it? So it's just no longer a vanilla product, it's much more than that. In our system, when we work with SMEs, MSP, we say that it's just no longer just a plain vanilla platform play. The question asked is, do you have engines of CRM or ERPs? Do you have a system of reconciliation? Do you have analytics on the top of it? So what today a customer is demanding is not just plain vanilla products, right? He's looking at much more than that. And if you're able to build in those layers into it, because I think that's what is getting value added. If you look at the entire Indian payment system, a lot of these things are set. I mean, UPI is a dominant today, right? But I think, and after being dominant too, the question again is, what's more? What's the next stage? What do you do more of it? What kind of data you're being able to acquire out of it? And how do you really build those layers across so that the merchant today is looking, he's not, because payment is now accepted more. The question is, what's the value add that you're getting more over and above it? I think that's what is differentiating every mode, whether you look at today a POS, or you look at today a QR, or you're looking at even the enterprise rate. And I think that is what is the expectation of the customer today. So that's what we're seeing a much larger. So it's much more than you have to offer across to value add to an end customer to come into your system now.
Okay. I think purely from bank perspective, we spoke about payments. How bank's role will change over a period of time, Indraneel, over a period of time, because this market is led by tech providers, right, largely. What's the role change you see right now in next few years, and why the shift will happen at a broad level? You can keep it short because I think we want to have one question from the at least audience, so maybe a quick one.
Sure. I think, just one thought, probably nobody's written a book about this because it's very deceptively simple. Right? And, when Arif starts talking, we realize it's not simple. But, and that's the whole crux of the matter, right? But anyway, coming to what you said, I think, all the points have already been made. I'll probably summarize them from a bank's point of view. When you say that banks, and I'll take the example of fintechs, right? And Federal Bank is one of the most loved banks by fintechs.
Yes.
We were onboarded, or we onboarded many fintechs when they started, right at the beginning of the whole fintech revolution, and they're still with us. So that says something about the fact that we've been doing something right. So essentially, this is going to be like a fintech partnership. Banks will provide the rails, they will provide the credit, they will provide the compliance, and the payment processors like Razorpay will essentially provide the front end, the UI, UX, the technology. Essentially, I see the bank's role evolving as sitting inside these channels somewhere and embedding our solutions there. That's one way to look at it, and offering contextual credit, offering at the point of sale, offering credit assessment and instant credit enablement. That's one way. The other very important thing, and I'll just maybe take 30 seconds about this. Classically, an entrepreneur has a great business idea, right? They don't want to understand the nitty-gritty of payments, paisa kahan se aaya, kahan gaya, all of that. So if you, Arif, like you said, if you offer them a bundled solution, they will very happily pay for it, right? There's no, and that is where people like Anand will make a difference. At the same side, on the bank side, and this is something that we've been speaking about, right? On the bank side, this is a very real problem because the volume of transactions and the volume of sheer number of transactions that comes through is so large that, and I like the words that he used, operating system for payments. If you actually build an operating system for payments, where you are able to provide dashboards to the merchant, to the vendor, and to the tech provider. And when I say tech provider, the people who provide the point of sale solutions, all of which can be meaningfully massaged and given to all three parties. I think that's also a problem, a big problem.
No, I agree. But it is some time away, right? Because all segments are different and everybody is building separate stacks. So I think that's something which is away for us. Maybe, and of course, when you spoke about Federal Bank as somebody who has been partnering with, I think two banks come to a fore whenever we think about fintech partnership, you and RBL. I think the best part is both leaderships is extremely humble and simple to work with. I think that's a basic DNA of how you guys have supported the market. If two banks, you take it off this ecosystem, I'm sure the market would have grown much lesser as a whole, right? So I think, Arif, from your perspective, how can banks work with platforms and convert the banking products into more attractive in terms of offers, in terms of credit, in terms of every journey, what can you guys help the ecosystem in?
Okay, this is
बहुत energy लग रही है अभी आपकी.
Yeah, this is going to be a little spicy one perhaps. So, other than Indraneel, any other bankers in the room?
There should be. How many bankers are here? One.
Which bank is this? JP Morgan. That's your team. I'm just trying to figure out how many people I'll offend by this. So.
That's my team who works on the merchant.
Cool. So, I spent my youth in a bank, right, and a great organization. But I think all the partnerships that I've seen, I think they've started maturing on both sides. Earlier there was a conflict, kiska customer hai, and all those kind of, I think that's behind us. So, and I think UPI has taught us that if you do this, you're not going to win together. But I yet see that it's a very linear equation, right? So banks come with their massive P&L, everything regulated. They can lend, they can do so many things. They have a book to back everything that they are. And inherently, they have a customer's trust, which is the cornerstone of everything, right? And their partnership with fintech is largely that, hey, they will go to do the go-to-market, they will do the distribution, right? Which is great, but I think it now needs to be much more transformative, right? So what I mean by that, there has to be co-creation and embedding, right? It cannot just be, in earlier days, for example, if you're an acquirer or you issued some kind of special cards, you needed a BIN sponsorship, right? And the bank came in with some kind of sponsorship and all that was good, right? But I don't think that's really co-creation. You've not gone out in the market and really created something net new. So I was just looking up and I think a lot of banks are now doing really fast MSME loans, 3 days turnaround, 4 days turnaround time, those kind of things, right? But that's also yet based on an ask, right? It's based on a projection or a forecast. It is, yes, it is, and it's fair. There are requirements that it requires 3 documents and those kind of things, right? But I don't yet find it contextual. So for example, him sitting on the table here or me, we are seeing the business data in a very different way, right? I do know that on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock, this particular business of mine needs to settle into his wholesaler. And that's when he needs something like a line or a BG, whatever the banking product or a lending product or a small overdraft product, right? How do we make sure that we can predict this beforehand? How can we make sure that this money comes in really contextual to when? And then the money is directly then from the escrow, or there are many methods. The ledger moves into the right vendor, so it doesn't go into the account. And I think those kind of things which we'll see really will evolve. And I think that's the true test as to whether we can expand this ecosystem. I think, one of the questions, I don't think we got enough time to talk about monetization. I think those when the opportunities will come, right? Right now what's happened is, I think to a certain extent, hopefully no regulators also in the room, is the regulatory arbitrage that comes into play, right? It's not necessarily a value co-creation in my opinion. I'm not saying it's not happened, but I think it has to now go to the next level, right? I mean, understand this, right? So, I think UPI is what, 80% of all online digital payments.
Almost.
And then you go back and say that UPI is no more a payment method, it's a checkout in itself, then where does it leave us, right? And then you come back over and say that, look, what can we do more? And then this is the world of AI, right? And then like, what is the force multiplier that we can put? I think that's where we really need to put our minds to, right? I know account aggregator in a big way, right? How many of us are trying to orchestrate that? I think those are the questions. I don't have the answers for them, but I certainly think that's where, is the potential for us to do much better or do a little more deeper work.
No. Actually, one of the bigger problem, I listen to them and I forget the next question, okay? So let me just go through the script, it happens. So I was listening, okay? I think from an infra layer, what part of the journeys are very complicated? Where is the real gap and how can platforms solve for it? Because we solve the wrong problems most of the time. Okay, I think if we had focused on these kind of problems much more than talking so much about blockchain, we would have solved for it. Everybody got lost in blockchain without realizing that these basics were not done, right? So what is the gap here and how can you solve for it?
Yeah, I think we all are a UPI dominant economy, right? And I think when I say UPI looks very simple on the top of it, but behind it, I mean there are acquirers, there are banks, there are issuers, there are TPAPs. There's a big whole lot of them. I think the biggest challenge I believe right now is on the reconciliation part of it, right? Because it has to be reconciled across various platforms. I think that's the biggest challenge as you start looking at it, right? And across obviously settlement too. So I think these are real-time challenges, and if the business is small, then it's an operational issue. If the bigger is big, if the businesses are big, then obviously it's a challenge issue. So these are real challenge issues if you really want to look at it, because there are multiple players involved. I think how do we solve this problem? One is to create a very standard reconciliation frameworks, right, where it can, where across banks, across everybody, there's one simple formats where reconciliation is easy for everybody to understand how the reconciliation happens across, because everybody today works on a different format. Every bank, every fintech, everybody has got a different format, and it's very difficult to standardize. So if you can do a standardized reconciliation framework, it really works. Second, I think, is a complete centralized risk and compliance layer, and if that works across banks, because everybody has created a very centralized risk framework, I'm sure it really helps to lower it across, the kind of risk that we really see today. And I think the most important, I believe, now is the orchestration layer coming in, right? Across all payments. We've seen some orchestration layers across, in cards. I don't know, we don't see it in UPI now. Still, there's some stage happening across. Not sure how much it's happening today, but I think orchestration multi-rail infrastructure, I believe, not from a perspective of, from a particular bank, but I think across the entire payment ecosystem. I think that's something we'll have to get pushed so as to ensure that we're able to take care of it, is what I feel.
No, perfect.
So, I mean, I'm just going to add like 10 seconds. See, I think, makes...
Last वाले session में एक भी बंदा नहीं हुआ तो छोड़ूंगा नहीं आपको.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. See, I just have a question, right? See, when we start talking about infra, somewhere if I'm wearing my bank hat, it goes back to RFP, building blocks, right? Core banking, middleware, LOS, and all those. And all of us are partnered with those banks, right? The question the banks need to ask that when I'm designing this, who have I invited from my fintech partner to be part of the requirement document? I don't think so you'll get the answer as positive.
And we should be asking MSMEs to come and build the solutions,
exactly, right? So what you have is an assumption and a hypothesis which is current, and by the time you're out in the market, you're already behind, right? So I think that's where what I meant by linear partnership needs to end. Because if you want to create infrastructure for the future, like UPI is a great product of really lot of participation, right? There's a massive number of entities, different organizations, public, government, private banks, payment companies who participated and made it a success. And they did something very simple. And you could build on it. And I think that's the mantra we need to adopt. And I don't think that's the learning we take back. We are very happy with 20 billion transactions. We'll get to billion a day soon enough. That's bad. I mean, that's good, a billion a day. But I don't think that's a learning that's really translating as to how we go about co-creating in the future. I think there's work to be done over there.
No, I agree. We take one and we just keep repeating it. There's so much out there to be done. Maybe we have, I know we are off time, but just one question I will pick it up from the group here. Anybody has any question to the panel here? I think payment is a tough area, I guess then. Yeah? None? Okay, then we close now. Thank you for being such a patient audience, and thank you, sir. This is amazing to be on this panel and learn from you guys. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists. Thanks a lot, and that's a token of appreciation from our side, ladies and gentlemen.
We can stand together. We're meeting for the first time on the same panel, right?